A pleasant morning to each and everyone. The Group 2 were tasked to present to you the second of the 7 steps of curriculum development, which is the formulation of learning objective. But before digging in on how to formulate a learning objective, let me present to you on what is a learning objective is all about. Now, to start with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of where you hope your students will end up. Once you know the destination, it is easier to figure out how will I know if my students will get there and what I can do or what I'm going to do to help them get there. Now, learning objectives are brief statements that describes what a student will learn and be able to do by the end of a lesson or course. They are student-centered and should be specific and measurable. Learning objectives help instructors to communicate their expectations for the students and can help students to understand the course activities and perform better on assessments. Now, learning objectives are sometimes referred to as the learning outcomes. These are the statements that clearly describes what students are expected to achieve as a result of the instruction. Different from broad learning goals, learning objectives provide a clear criteria for the instructors to assess whether the students are meeting the desired learning goals. Now, the learning objectives can serve as a compass for instructors. This is to help them guide the design of a fair course assessment plans, then selection of the content, the activities, the teaching strategies or technologies, and can make sure all critical course components are purposefully aligned to support student learning. This can also serve as a map for the students. Can help them to see a clear picture of where the course is taking them and what is expected to be successful in this course. Students will be able to direct and monitor their learning throughout the lesson or unit or through the semester by referring back to the learning objective. For the formulation of objective, now, based on the diagnosis, objectives are formulated that are specific, measurable, and achievable. The formulation of objectives in the second step of Hilda Taba's curriculum development model, termed as the formulation of objective, the teacher, also serving as the curriculum designer, proceeds to define the specific objective based on the identified needs. Once the teacher has diagnosed the educational requirements of the students, this step involves articulating a clear and targeted goals that the curriculum aims to achieve. It marks a crucial stage where the teacher establishes a framework for what the students should accomplish, aligning the objectives with the identified educational needs.
All right, thank you so much, Ma'am Bukila, for the introduction. Now, before we go down to the formulation of learning objectives, allow me first to introduce to you the key aspects of Hilda Taba's approach to formulating learning objectives. So, upon knowing this, we will be able to know how to effectively formulate learning objectives based on Hilda Taba's approach. Okay, we have one, inductive approach. So Taba advocated for an inductive approach, where teachers begin by formulating specific learning experience and gradually generalize towards broader objectives. So, on Taba's approach, she greatly believed that teachers must introduce the learning objectives from specific to general. According to her point of view, she believed that teachers are the closest to the learners. So which means they are in the best position to identify what students need and how to develop these learning objectives based on classroom experiences. So teachers must able to deliver the learning objectives from specific to general in order for the students to easily grasp the introduced learning objectives. Now let's proceed to number 2. The diagnosis of learners' needs. So this emphasizes that learning objectives should be based on a diagnosis of students' need. So teachers should observe and assess their students' readiness level, interest, and challenges before setting objectives. So this is very important, no? So understanding the specific context and background of the learners is critical to formulating relevant and effective learning goals. So teachers must be responsible for doing that because again, they are the closest to the learners. So they understand, they know better the learners, specifically on their needs. Now let's proceed to number 3. We have the behavioral and cognitive objectives. So Taba's approach valued not only what students can do, but also how they think and approach learning. So basically, what the students can do falls for the behavioral objectives. So behavioral objectives describes what students should be able to do after the instruction. So these are the observable actions or skills. And then when we talk about the cognitive objectives, these focus on the intellectual process or thought patterns that students should develop. For example, we have the critical thinking and the problem solving. So that is according to Taba's approach. She deeply valued not only what students can do, the behavioral, but also how they think, or the cognitive, something to do with the brain and approach learning. All right, so we have number 4, sequential learning. Taba believed that learning objectives should reflect a logical sequence, moving from simple to complex ideas. So, Taba's approach emphasized that curriculum objectives should guide learners through progressively challenging content that deepens their understanding over time. So, this is the importance of having a logical sequence. So, the objectives should be developed with continuity in mind, allowing students to build upon their prior knowledge progressively. So, from simple to complex ideas. Now, we're down to number 5. We have the multiple objectives. So in this part, this recognizes that different types of learning objectives are needed for different domains. So when we say different domains, for example, there's a need for an objective to focus on knowledge acquisition, while others emphasize skills development or attitudinal change. So Taba categorized learning into different types of objectives. We have knowledge. So when we say knowledge, it talks about facts or concepts. And then if we talk about skills development, we have the procedures on how to do something. We have also the techniques, how the students will do that activity in order for them to attain development. Or we can have the attitude, or which leads to attitudinal change. We have the change of values, change of behavior, not specifically changing good to bad, but something good to better, or even bad to good. So that is the objective, the attitudinal change that we are looking for. So the change of values, the change of behavior. That change will lead to something better. And then through having this, the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude, all in working together, this ensures that a well-rounded curriculum addresses all areas that students need. All right, so those are the different key aspects of Hilda Taba's approach to formulating learning objectives. This might be simple, but plays a great role in formulating an effective learning objectives in order to address the learner's needs. And now let's proceed to Taba's influence on learning objectives, which will be discussed by Ma'am Ramelin.
As a continuation, I am assigned to discuss Hilda Taba's influence on learning objectives. So we have here the first one, teacher-driven. It centers around teacher involvement in curriculum development, including the formulation of learning objectives. This ensures that objectives are grounded in the actual need of students. So when we see teacher-driven, mostly would think that the teacher has the sole authority in formulating learning objectives. However, it is not purely an authority but a responsibility as well. It is a responsibility as a teacher to ensure that the learning objectives being formulated would actually respond to the needs of our students. So basically, our learning objectives may vary according to our students' learning pace, learning abilities or techniques, and most importantly, to their needs. So like for example, you're handling the same subject in different classes. So it does not mean that the learning objectives being formulated for the other class would be effective on the other class as well. So as a teacher, we are responsible, and we need to be extra careful and observant to our student needs. And second one is flexibility and adaptation. Taba's approach allows for adaptation to specific classroom context, making learning objectives more responsive and relevant. So when we say flexibility and adaptation, it means that our learning objectives are accommodating to our student needs. So as early as formulation of learning objectives, it should be flexible and adaptive already to the learning goals of our students, because the succeeding activities would depend on our learning objectives. If we cannot formulate and accommodating learning objectives, our activities would not be effective. It would not be responsive and relevant as well. And last one, focus on critical thinking. It often prioritizes higher ordering thinking objectives, encouraging deeper intellectual engagement, not just rote memorization or skill execution. So when we are formulating learning objective, it should focus on higher order thinking skills such as reasoning, problem solving, and even decision making, because these skills are valuable not just in the academic or in the academ, but also in real life. And that is our ultimate goal as a teacher. We need to ensure that everything that has been learned by our student in the classroom should be applicable in the real world. And that's it. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. For today's continuation of our topic, I was tasked to discuss on the formulation of the learning objectives. So, as we all know that learning objectives plays a crucial role in the teaching and learning process. It serves as the bone in the learning process, as it guides us, we as teachers and as well as learners. So, as what Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. So, meaning to say, we are visualizing the desired outcomes to have the clarity and direction without getting lost in our goals during our business schedule. And also we need to follow the SMART criteria in the formulation. So SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bounded. Okay, so let's start with the S for specific. So to avoid confusion and vagueness, we should think of objectives that clearly articulates what the learner is expected to achieve and easily understood. Okay, so M for measurable. So it is important to assess whether the learning outcomes has been achieved through what? Okay, through assessments. What else? Through projects, through assignments. Okay, and for the third one, A for achievable. Achievable, or we also make sure that learners' current abilities and their resources available. So it should be realistic and attainable within the context or the course of learning environment. So next is relevant. Okay, so it should align with the learner's educational goals, ensuring that the knowledge and skills gained are applicable and meaningful. Next is time-bound objectives. So as for the time-bound, so objectives established a clear time frame for achieving the learning outcomes. So this provides urgency and helps learners prioritize the task effectively. Therefore, the formulation of the learning objectives using the SMART criteria, it fosters the clarity and focus of educational settings. Okay, next is breakdown of learning objectives, so the clear, concise, and focus on single aspect of learning. So let's start with the first one. So clear. So to attain the clarity of the objectives, we should use specific terms that leave a little room for interpretation. Next is the concise. So for concise, objectives deliver content in a straightforward manner. So without unnecessary elaboration but simply use the straightforward wordings. Next is the last one, the focusing on a single aspect of learning. So it helps students concentrate on mastering one specific skills or concept at a time. The next one, hierarchy, or the hierarchy of objectives. So because of the hierarchy of objectives, we can create a learning experience that are not only structured and comprehensible, but also fosters critical thinking and lifelong learning in students and in the teacher's side. And I have sample verbs for that, for remembering. Example of that is recalling and defining. So because we want them, our lessons will be fulfilling and stored in their long-term memory, so we must use the higher order thinking skills. So like applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Incorporating these verbs into objectives, we can ensure that we are targeting appropriate skills for their students to develop.
All right, thank you so much, Ma'am Kutara. So to sum up everything, learning objectives are specific, measurable statements detailing what students are expected to learn, understand, and be able to do after a lesson, activity, or course. They serve as a roadmap for lesson planning, instruction, and assessment, ultimately leading to a more effective learning experience. So in Hilda Taba's method for formulating learning objectives places teachers and their understanding of students' needs at the heart of the process, creating a responsive, inductive, and structured approach to developing effective curriculum goals. That ends our topic in formulating the learning objectives by Hilda Taba. Thank you so much for listening.